The biggest Memorial Day weekend bomb in 40 years. Furiosa. There's a lot to discuss, and I'm so happy I have both of you on to discuss this film. I think a lot of people feel, in general, that the film is fine. Like, I don't think anyone thinks it's bad necessarily, but I also don't know that many people feel that it's great. And sometimes films like that are the best to kind of dive into because you can kind of see where something went well and where things went wrong. I'd love to hear from both of you initially your thoughts on Furiosa, and also maybe like what the vibe was at your theaters. Like, was it busy? Was it empty?
How many people were at your theater? My theater had, I said this before, my theater had like a couple of couples and then some like single people, but it was also like there was less than 25 people in the entire theater, and that was a 75 seat. So it's there wasn't a lot. I don't know. How many people were in yours?
Because mine was 3 o'clock on a Saturday and it was no one.
Okay.
Wow.
So I mean, not an empty theater. I mean, it might have just been that time, but no one.
And I know Nerdy Film Girl is different for you because you're obviously in the
Right.
big city, so it's always going to be a little bit different when it coming to yours. But what was the vibe like for yours?
I mean, I feel like if this had been a traditionally like big movie, you would have felt it more at the theater in general. Like, my theater was pretty full, but the rest, like when you're like outside of that theater and you're kind of like seeing what people are seeing, there were not a lot of people in the movie theater that day. So
Right.
yeah. But yeah,
Well,
so John, what are your initial thoughts?
I like the movie. I've been around the circuit talking about how I like the movie. I don't like it more than Fury Road, but I do
Right.
like the movie quite a bit. I think the idea of this is fun with Miller, and it's also kind of interesting to see like Miller, who's I believe in his 80s, kind of just like with this crazy imagination and just continues to push out. So I enjoyed it. I think the same way, although it's not talked about a lot, I think the same way that people talked about Charlize Theron basically stealing the show from Tom Hardy, which I do believe she did in Fury Road. I think Chris Hemsworth steals the show from Anya, who doesn't really show up until midway through anyway, here. And I think it works. But as always, I kept saying I don't think it's gonna make money, and
Right.
here we are.
That's what's bizarre about this film is it's not a bad film. I think the title was a mistake. I understand the logic of, well, you felt like you had to do it, but it is disingenuous to call it a Mad Max. So I understand it's the world, but it's a Furiosa movie. But it's not even necessarily a Furiosa movie. It's more of a Chris Hemsworth movie. That being said, it's a good movie. It's a fun movie. The only thing I think about in terms of like the viewership experience is the pacing on it. I missed that Fury Road pacing where it was like, we're heading to this objective and we're going to turn around and go right back to this one. But it also ended on a good note. So Fury Road was like, I can watch it anytime. Charlize Theron, Tom Hardy, everybody did a great job. I actually think the biggest missing component, and I was going to ask you guys about this, is Nicholas Holt's performance in Fury Road is so important. It shows you that aspect of that world. And I don't really have a character that shows me more in this movie. It's really just the two of them, and really just Chris Hemsworth. That's the whole thing.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think the runtime for me and the pacing, as you said, was one of its biggest issues. I think the short runtime in Fury Road, and I'm even forgetting the exact runtime on it, but it was much shorter than
Compared
this.
to this, it's short.
Oh no, Fury Road's 2 hours just about, and this is almost 2.5, two and three. Like there's
and that made a huge difference.
Yeah,
and I think that kind of stems from, we've heard so much about how this is George Miller's passion project and that he actually wanted to make this before Fury Road with Charlize, and the studios didn't want that. So I feel like it is that kind of thing for him where it's like, oh, it's my passion project. I'm old. I can do whatever I want. No one's telling me no. And he did not kill any of his darlings. He did not trim when he should have. And I think that really, really tremendously hurt the movie because I think that like you can probably sell people more on seeing a movie that's good or fine if the runtime is shorter than what it is. And I got to say, I don't know who has brought this up, but one of the things that really bothered me was um, when Furiosa is transitioning. So she's like a little girl, and then she gets kidnapped. This is really a small spoiler for people because it doesn't really affect the rest of the movie. She is told she's going to become one of the women that like breed for the population and be kind of kept in this garden thing. She escapes and hides, and then we flash forward a tiny bit while she's still kind of a kid, and they think she's a boy. Then we fast forward to when she's Anya Taylor-Joy portraying her, and she takes her helmet off, and she has this flowing long hair. I'm sorry, but like, how are you to expect to believe that she's passed herself off as a little boy with hair like that when you know they've got the craziest military? They have guards. Like the fact that that guy didn't recognize the fact that she's still there, like it just was so strange to me. Like that was such a big plot point problem to me.
They're like, it's weird. They're expecting you to assume that it was just like okay, like because she like had ascended to this point of view of like she's useful, it's okay that she is, but they don't explain that they wouldn't just take her back upstairs. Like clearly that's like a big question mark of like, wait a minute, you're telling me they would look at her and be like, no, you know, I don't know. It was a bizarre moment.
Totally. And they could have just had her cut her hair off.
Right.
Like they showed. I thought that was like, oh, that's when she cuts her hair off as a child and then gets older and she just keeps it short.
But they didn't want to sell the movie on that. They needed to sell the movie on Anya's look. And Anya is a pretty one. So it's like they had to sell on the look, and the look is with the hair.
I will say that that's a good point. If I'm going to get down to the nitty gritty, Anya Taylor-Joy is a wonderful actress. I don't think she does a bad job, but the look of Furiosa going from Charlize Theron, what we saw with her just like in the, whenever they tried to make Furiosa in this look dirty and grimy, like she had been, it didn't work. Like it just didn't feel the same. Like in the other movie, you totally believe that has one arm. It looks very natural. In this, that is the most unnatural part for me, is it's very fake, like the fake arm in this.
Yeah, and someone told me recently, sorry, before I say it's just really relevant to this, John, and then you can totally go. Someone told me recently that it was never planned actually for Charlize to have the buzz cut, and it was during production that she was so sick of the wind and the sand with like long hair that she was like, George, I'm just going to shave this off and just deal with it. And he was like, oh, this looks badass. You know what I mean? So he kept
yeah, it worked.
But also, if you look at how they do it, I like the movie, but most of the stuff they do with Anya is they kind of have the war paint on her a little bit, and then there's certain scenes where they just kind of put dirt on her face. Whereas if you have Charlize, and I'm a Charlize stan, so obviously I'm always gonna, but there's a level of dirtiness to her, and even Charlize is a beautiful woman, but like there's a level of dirtiness to her that makes a lot more sense in what you see. Now, I get it. There's a build difference. Charlize is like nearly 6 feet. She's like muscular. I think she's still one of the best female action heroes we have out. But the fact that she did have the buzz cut and she did have the paint that went all the way down to her eyelids, and then she is dirty on top of that. And, there's things there where it does give you that feel. And there's a slight weird thing where it's like, we want to sell Furiosa, but we also kind of want to sell the beauty of Anya. And I'm like, I don't know if those two things mixed.
No.
Yeah.
That girl,
I agree.
Was perfect casting though. The little girl, I thought she
she did great.
Oh, yeah, she was. Yeah.
That's the part that they should have condensed on the time. It wasn't bad, but that 40-minute beginning was rough. Like that needed to be squashed down to like 20 at least. I mean, a minimum 20, maybe even less, because it was a rough thing. I've never seen a movie though in such an odd spot where it's good. I won't watch it again probably unless just like happen chance.
Yeah.
But it can't live in the same universe and work as well. Like it just doesn't fit right. Even though it's good and it is Furiosa, if you watch Fury Road and then you watch this, I think you'd be even more disappointed. Like if you watch Fury Road and then you went straight into this, I think it would actually have a negative effect on it.
Yeah, the things that I liked, that they could have. And I don't even know if they should have expanded on it because it was kind of cool. It was like kind of vague, but the two other locations where like they got gas from, and then the other one, I thought like
Mhm.
those were really cool. We didn't really
Yeah.
ever see the green place that much, which was fine. I think the beginning is okay because everyone else has not seen it, so I think it's good to kind of just like show it and that's it, and leave it up to everyone's imagination. I do think that Tom Burke did a really great job, and he's the guy that she learns from and becomes her
Oh,
romantic
yeah.
interest. I thought he just like
Praetorian.
felt like he lived there just organically.
Yeah. No, his
I
performance is
think
good.
Praetorian Jack was kind of used as like a, this isn't Mad Max, but this is the closest we can get as like a little bit of an insert. And I think he does a great job in doing that. But that's what it felt like, where it was just like,
Right.
all right, we need to have something that can somewhat mimic it. And I think they knew that, and they went into that moving forward. And so when they kind of meet and the whole thing is like, hey, we're trying to they're building she's building the war rig and everything like that. Like there's things that make sense in that way. But man, I don't know. I don't know. There's that, despite the fact that there is a great supporting cast here, I kind of have to agree with the fact of that supporting cast in the first movie is just so good.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's
It
almost as
just
if every little
yeah.
bit you see here, there's something that's a little bit better in Fury Road, which makes
Right.
you go like, man, would I watch this again? And you kind of go, well, maybe not. I don't know. I don't know.
Right. The supporting cast really matters. And in that first, in Fury Road, it really makes sense that like you're there for Mad Max, but they do a great job of all these other things work really well. In this
Yeah.
one, you're supposed to be there for Furiosa, but you're really there for Chris Hemsworth. And I feel like they wasted an opportunity to really use his story better because at the end, it changes a lot in the last 20 minutes. The whole vibe changes. And I don't think it matched the beginning. And if it was his movie from the get go, whether you call it Furiosa or not, because you did the same thing on Fury Road, I think they missed the opportunity to do something. And I have to say this: I think the nose was a big mistake. I think it was unnecessary, or it was too much. You could have done something
Maybe a little
slight,
too
but
much. Yeah.
it's Chris Hemsworth. We're not buying that dude has that nose. It's just not. I don't know.
No, I agree. And I think it actually might have been great if they didn't call it Furiosa and they called it like his character name, which I don't remember what it is. It's like Demetrius or whatever,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then it was like in the Mad Max world,
Right.
but it's like this is going to be the villain's
Yeah.
story kind of. And then she would just be a big focal point on it.
Yeah.
And, that would have worked really well for me. Some of the action was I think, fantastic. The stuff when they were kind of paragliding like down or using the I don't do
Glide
those
bikes,
things.
whatever they
You know
were,
what
the
I'm
little
saying?
Yeah.
helicopter
No,
bikes.
they had all
Yeah.
sorts of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, like some of that stuff was really cool. I did really think Chris Hemsworth did a great job. It is kind of cartoonish, but I kind of liked that. And yeah, guys, overall, I think it's like just trimming the fat from it would have made a huge difference. Um, the color grading was
Mhm.
a little off, and like, yeah, it was more CGI. Like you had mentioned, John, you were like, oh, it's definitely got moments where the CGI is very
Yeah,
there
it's
in your
noticeable in
face.
certain parts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I guess he maybe he thinks like it was a huge benefit to use it because he's so used to practical filmmaking. I don't know if he was like, oh, this is going to make it look even better, and it actually did the opposite.
Right.
Yeah,
I,
so
now that you say the passion project thing of George Miller, it makes a lot of sense. Like this seems like what he wanted to do. And I bet the studio knew behind the scenes. So that brings me to the other question is I think they marketed too much because I think this was going to lose money regardless. And they should have pulled back because you weren't going to force it to work. I don't feel like, because I think the fans that
Yeah.
said this is Mad Max without Mad Max weren't going.
Well, that's the
no,
problem with the title. You can't, I don't
Right.
believe you can put a title of, I don't think you could put the title of a titular character in something else without that titular character being present.
Right.
For example, Rocky is in Creed, but if you had put Creed,
Right.
a Rocky Saga, or something like that, at least you know that Creed show or Rocky shows up in Creed. Like you would see Sylvester Stallone there. But when you have stuff like the Continental, even they were smart enough to kind of go from the world of John Wick rather than a John Wick saga, because there's nothing in that show that really has
Right.
to do with John Wick particularly. And so you go
Yeah.
there, but you're calling this a Mad Max saga. The wording does not work because now this is supposed to be something that is truly a part of the story
Mhm.
personally for Mad Max. Not,
Yeah.
yes, Furiosa is a part of like something that he goes to, like that's somebody who they have an experience together, but that's not necessarily his life. If you would have called it the Wastelander saga or something along those lines, I think it would have been a lot better. Or if you just left it alone as Furiosa, I think it would have been a lot better. But I think that Mad Max saga thing kind of backfired a little bit.
Yeah, or like from the world of Mad Max. Or
Yeah,
like,
or even that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that this is an example of what Warner Brothers gets into situations, though, I think, where you get these great directors and you get their projects, but then when they want to do something, you've got to roll with it. And we're about to find out if Joker 2 works. It's the same scenario of like, well, the first one was so good, you have to say yes to whatever. Well, I bet you Warner Brothers wasn't like, yes, let's make it a jukebox musical. That was probably not their first like go to, and it might work and it might be great, but this is Warner Brothers. Is when they do stuff, they end up with these great directors and great stuff, but it comes at a cost. And the cost sometimes is you make a movie but this movie is going to fail spectacularly at the box office. But I bet you there's a lot of people that will watch it on streaming that would never admit it. Like when it's on streaming, they'll watch it. Like Mad Max fans,
Oh,
I
of
bet
course.
you watch it on streaming. It's not the same, but
or they just wait for it.
Right, you just wait.
It's not a matter of like people not wanting to see it per se. It's more so a
Right, but
matter of
just
people just
why
decide,
rush?
I just don't want to see
Yeah.
it in theaters. I
Yeah.
don't have to rush for it. It'll come
There
out.
is no rush for this. No spoiler. It's not like Deadpool
Yeah.
Wolverine, where if you don't see it the first day, you will know everything that happened. Like
You
it will be
can't put
ruined.
spoilers.
Yeah.
How can you put spoilers for a movie we already know
we
technically
know.
what happened?
I
So,
hate prequels because of this. It immediately, there's the excitement level. And the end of this movie, I will say, the only thing that surprised me was Chris Hemsworth's character, which you start to feel a little bit more for him, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
it's a cycle. They just all do this. You become the monster. Like everyone becomes
Yep.
the monster eventually.
Well, kind of like to get towards the end of this video, I have to bring up something that is going to be very spoilery. There's not a lot to talk about it, but I just needed to get your opinion of what this was. When towards the end she gets kidnapped and she wakes up and there's like what are they called? I hate them. Some mealworms like all over the place and rotting flesh. First of all, what do you think that actually? What do you think that crazy old couple is actually doing with those bodies? And second of all, they then show a man that kind of looks like Mad Max. Did he drag her and give her to them? Like, what do you think that was?
That whole like where on the cliff thing.
Yeah.
I
don't think that was Max though.
Okay.
Well, he said that's on the cliff with the interceptor is supposed to be him, but I don't know if that was him that actually helped. I don't know if that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
but that's him on the cliff. Like that's what they said. That's what Miller said.
Yeah.
I hate that, by the way.
That's really, and the fact that that came out later and they were kind of interviewing to make sure that was being said. I don't know.
It didn't
I
make
don't know
sense how she ended up from where she was in the hole. Like it did not make sense, but it's the same thing you highlighted earlier with her being not a girl, but then they know she's a girl. There was this is where you have a great director, but the pressure is not on where the studio's like, hey, does that make sense necessarily?
Yeah. He's like, oh, people will read between the lines. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we don't want to read between the lines when you make such obvious choices.
Right. This is an action flick. Like I don't want it. Like this isn't a thriller. Like this is.
Yeah, and then there's the aspect of her revenge is supposed to be so great that she can basically escape from whatever just because the revenge is so great, right? That's mainly why we get the arm scene, is because like her revenge is so big. She has to escape the chains basically by severing, So like there's things like that, and you go, okay, well, at least we know what the mindset is. And I think that mindset, that singular mindset of I need to get this revenge and I'm willing to do whatever by any means necessary, I think that feeds well into Fury Road. But I think that's probably the only thing that feeds that well into Fury Road.
Yeah, it does not connect well. It really doesn't. They try really hard at the end to show you some things to make you, but unnecessary in my opinion.
Yeah, and I will say, I don't think that she comes off as a girl boss. And I think if you think about her motivations for the next film, I do think she a lot of that comes from because she was in love with this man. And I think that like watching him be dragged like that, also like yeah, her arm got cut off, but she did that on purpose and like to get out of there, and it was a horrible situation. But I think she was so like, are you kidding me? The one person I think I can like escape with and like find happiness with and get out of this hellhole. And I think that is what a lot of movies recently, they don't even want to do. They don't want to have a female be like, oh my God, I'm so in love with this person. That's why I'm taking revenge, And I liked that. I think that that's a normal response.
Yeah, we're willing to do it for children. And we're willing to do it for like even parents, right? Like, oh, you know, the whole you killed my family type thing, or my child, the man on fire, or you kidnapped somebody. We're willing to do it for everybody but couples in these days for some reason. It's like I could see a man or a woman go into that for their significant other and going crazy if that significant other, and maybe that's what The Crow is going to play on later this year when that comes out. But like, it's like things like that where you're like, that's a good plot point that has lasted for generations for a reason. And I thought that was like nice to see. So yeah.
Well, do you guys think, as we end this, do you think that this is scaring studios, or do you think that they are going to know that this is kind of, they understand why this didn't do well? Or like, what are your thoughts on that? And then we'll like your final thoughts on all that, I guess.
Depends on the studio.
Yeah.
I think that Warner Brothers is looking at the year and they are really not liking what's
pissed.
they because Dune 2 started so strong for them, and it's such a good start for them box office wise. And then you got them in Legendary. They have the split with Godzilla and Kong. That was a win. This as a surprise to them, because the failure is worse than I'd say that they could have expected. They may have not thought it was going to do good, but this is going to be historic. Yeah, I mean, so there's going to be something to it. I think that the movie theater industry is about to get a lot of these, though, that really surprised them, where stuff like Ghostbusters, they were convinced it was going big. We weren't. I mean, a lot of people online weren't. But there's a lot of summer movies that could be a problem. A lot of them could even Deadpool Wolverine. If it doesn't hit the billion mark, it's going to raise eyebrows. I mean, because that means it would do technically worse than the last two Deadpool movies. And that would be a huge issue for Disney that's wanting at least that, I mean, they at least want to break that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to showcase that if you are going to do a movie that's not an event, then that movie has to be a franchise. But if you're going to do a franchise, that movie franchise has to have the titular character. That's what's going on with Planet of the Apes a little bit. It's like, well, there's no Caesar. So I don't know, right? Like things like that start to play into effect. Yeah. I don't know if Ballerina is going to do well without John Wick. Like we don't know if certain things like there's things where you're kind of like, I don't know if a Furiosa works. We know a Madam Web or a Craven or a Morbius, like these things don't work without Spider-Man, and Venom is just big enough of a villain, the same way Joker is, where it's like, all right, well, they can do it on their own because they are literally the number one villain of that titular hero. But like you can't do that with other people. So
and it might not work again. It might,
right?
Yeah. So.
And this is going to kill on streaming. And I think what it's going to really reveal is the fact that these types of spinoffs can work fantastic if they are going to streaming. If they are going to be in theaters, you might need to kind of pull back, because just because you have the name, the name's not enough. You need to have the character, or you need to make it such an event that it matters. And Furiosa, unfortunately, isn't either one.
Well, I think you guys were just spot on with everything you said. This was a great conversation. Thank you guys so much for watching. And yeah, I think I would say you don't have to see it in theaters. If you want to see some great action and that the big screen is important to you, definitely go check it out for that. Anya Taylor-Joy, I think I was not thrilled to see her. She's actually really good in this, and does a solid job in my opinion. But if you don't care to see it on the big screen, I don't blame you, and check it out at home. Thanks again so much, and thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you all next time.